In June 2014, a research team at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention launched a massive project. They aimed to answer a simple yet elusive question: what is the single healthiest food on the planet? They were not looking for opinions or trends. They were looking for hard data. They analyzed 47 of the most common superfoods, fruits and vegetables we are told to eat every day, and measured exactly how much potassium, fiber, protein, calcium, iron, thiamine, riboflavin, niacin, folate, zinc, and vitamin A they contained. They also tracked vitamin B6, vitamin B12, vitamin C, vitamin D, vitamin E, and vitamin K. Each food was evaluated based on the nutrients delivered per 100 calories. The results were shocking. Kale, the darling of every health food store in America, scored 49 out of 100. Spinach, the legendary muscle builder, did much better, scoring 86. Blueberries, praised as the ultimate antioxidant superfood, scored only 11. But at the very top of the list, standing alone with a perfect score of 100 out of 100, sat a plant that most modern Americans have never even tasted. It was not an exotic berry from the Amazon or a root from the high Andes. It was a humble, peppery green leaf that grows in cold, shallow streams across the northern hemisphere: watercress. According to the most rigorous scientific analysis ever conducted by the U.S. government, watercress is the most nutrient-dense food on Earth. And yet, if you walk into a typical American supermarket today, you will likely not find it. You will see walls of kale and pyramids of apples. But the king of nutrition is invisible. Why? The answer is not a conspiracy. It is far more interesting and far more tragic. It is a story about how we built a modern world that prioritized one specific metric above all others, and how that metric accidentally erased the best food we have. This is the story of the ghost in the produce aisle. To understand what we lost, you have to go back to a time when this plant was not a ghost. You have to go back to the foggy, coal-stained streets of Victorian London. In the mid-1800s, London was the beating heart of the Industrial Revolution. But it was a brutal place to be poor. The working class lived on bread, sugary tea, and cheap grease. Malnutrition was rampant. Scurvy, caused by vitamin C deficiency, was a constant threat in the slums. However, the Victorians had a secret weapon they called poor man's bread. Every morning, long before the sun rose over the Thames, hundreds of street sellers would fan out across the city. They were often children, some as young as 5 or 6, barefoot in the cold, carrying wicker baskets stacked high with fresh green bunches of watercress. The cry of fresh creases, fresh water creases, was the soundtrack of the London morning, echoing off the brick walls of factories and tenements. For a single penny, a factory worker could buy a large bunch. In that one bunch, they got more iron than a serving of spinach, more calcium than a glass of milk, and more vitamin C than an orange. It was a nutritional miracle. The Victorians valued watercress so highly they built infrastructure just to keep the city fed. In Hampshire, 50 miles away, vast networks of gravel beds were dug into the chalk streams. These were not muddy swamps. They were sophisticated, crystal-clear aquatic farms. The water had to be constantly moving, bubbling up from deep underground aquifers, rich in minerals, flowing through the beds to keep the plants crisp and sweet. They even built a railway line, the Midlands Railway, specifically to rush this perishable green from the streams to the city. It was known locally as the Watercress Line. Imagine a society that valued a vegetable so highly they built a railroad just to move it. The system was efficient. The crop was cut at 4 a.m., loaded onto the steam train by 6 a.m., and sold on the streets of London by 8 a.m. From the cold stream to the worker's sandwich in 4 hours, it was the original farm-to-table system. And then the world changed. As the 20th century dawned, populations exploded. Cities grew outward, sprawling away from the train lines. The local food systems that had fed humanity for thousands of years began to strain. We needed a new way to feed millions of people who lived hundreds, sometimes thousands of miles from the nearest farm. We needed an engineering solution. In 1894, the Berry Seed Company gave us one. They released a new variety of lettuce derived from French Batavia. It was dense, pale, and formed a tight, hard ball of leaves that looked more like a cabbage than a lettuce. They noticed something remarkable. You could throw it in a crate, cover it with crushed ice, and ship it in a rail car from California to New York. When it arrived a week later, it looked exactly the same as the day it was picked. Because it was shipped under mounds of crushed ice, they called it iceberg. Iceberg lettuce was a technological marvel. It was the first vegetable that acted like a manufactured product. It did not wilt, it did not bruise, and it stacked perfectly in boxes. It was uniform, predictable, and durable. In 1919, Americans consumed 4.1 pounds of lettuce per person per year. By the mid-1950s, consumption rose to 14 pounds per capita. Iceberg had become America's most consumed vegetable. Then came the real innovations. Whirlpool developed vacuum cooling in the 1950s, removing field heat immediately after harvest. Modified atmosphere packaging followed. By the 1960s, iceberg lettuce could stay fresh for up to 28 days. Think about that. You could pick a head of lettuce in the Salinas Valley of California, put it on a train, store it in a warehouse, drive it to a supermarket, and let it sit in a customer's refrigerator for a month before they ate it. This was the holy grail of the emerging industrial food system. Supermarkets loved iceberg because it was low risk, high profit, and the perfect inventory. But watercress was a nightmare. Watercress is 93% water, and its stems are hollow. It is an aquatic plant that relies on the pressure of water to stay upright. The moment you cut it from the stream, it begins to die. It starts to wilt within hours. Even with the best refrigeration, it has a shelf life of perhaps 2 to 3 days, maybe 5 if you're lucky. In the new world of long-haul trucking and centralized distribution centers, watercress was a liability. It couldn't survive the journey. It wilted in the back of 18-wheelers and turned to mush under the fluorescent lights of grocery store display cases. That is not a small difference. That is a 10 times difference in shelf life for a food distribution system built around centralized warehouses. That difference was decisive. Supermarkets needed produce that could sit on shelves without wilting. They needed uniform appearance and predictable supply. Watercress failed every test. When the Watercress Railway closed in 1963 under the beaching cuts, watercress couldn't make the journey from Hampshire to London anymore. Road transport took longer. Refrigerated trucks helped, but watercress still arrived wilted around the edges. Iceberg thrived. It shipped from California to New York without complaint, stacked perfectly, and looked fresh for weeks. So the system made a choice. It didn't choose based on flavor or health. It chose based on logistics. We replaced the vegetable that scored 100 out of 100 with a vegetable that scored 7. That is the actual score iceberg lettuce received in the CDC study. 7, not 70. 7. Iceberg lettuce is 96% water. The pale inner leaves, the part most of us actually eat, have been shielded from the sun, meaning they contain almost no chlorophyll, few vitamins, and very few antioxidants. It is essentially crunchy water. But it was convenient, and in the 20th century, convenience was king. By the 1980s, 90% of Britain's watercress growers had quit. The 1,000 acres that fed Victorian England shrank to 150 acres. In the United States, watercress never even stood a chance. It was relegated to a garnish, a sprig of green on a fancy plate that you pushed aside to get to the steak. We traded nutrition for shelf life. We traded the most chemically complex food in nature for a biological shipping container. And the cost of that trade is only now becoming clear. When we talk about the modern diet, we usually talk about sugar and fat, but we rarely talk about the absence of density. We are eating more calories than ever, but we are starving for nutrients. We have filled our plates with foods that have been bred for durability, size, and sweetness, but stripped of the bitter, complex compounds that our bodies evolved to crave. Watercress is rich in a compound called phenethyl isothiocyanate, which gives the plant its peppery bite. In laboratory studies, this compound has been shown to suppress the development of cancer cells. It is a powerful medicine. Iceberg lettuce has none of this. It is safe, bland, and empty. When the CDC published that study in 2014, journalists rushed to find the few remaining watercress farmers left in the world. One farmer, whose family had been growing watercress in the same chalk streams for generations, just laughed. "We have been telling people this for years," he said. "Nobody listens." The Victorian working class did not need a CDC study. They knew watercress kept their children healthy. A bunch for breakfast delivered more nutrition than any other food they could afford. Victorian England had railways that moved watercress from Hampshire to London in 4 hours. Modern America has warehouses that hold produce for 2 weeks before it reaches a store. The system changed and watercress did not. The tragedy is not just that we stopped eating watercress. The tragedy is that we forgot why we ate it. The Victorians did not have mass spectrometers or government studies, but they had a connection to the land. They knew that when they felt weak, when their children looked pale, or when winter dragged on too long, they needed the poor man's bread. They felt the effect in their bodies. We have lost that feeling. We rely on labels and marketing. And because watercress does not have a marketing budget and does not fit neatly into a plastic clamshell container, it remains invisible, but it is not extinct. The streams are still there. The plant is still growing quietly in the wild, wet places of the world. You can still find it at farmers markets or in the specialty corners of high-end grocery stores. It does not look like much. It is usually a small, expensive bunch wrapped in a rubber band, looking a little tired. It costs $4 while the head of iceberg next to it costs $2. But look past the price tag and the wilting leaves. That humble plant is a survivor. It is a reminder that the best food is not the one that looks prettiest on Instagram or stays fresh the longest in your fridge. The best food is the one that fights to stay alive. The system optimized for the wrong variable. It optimized for the truck, not the human. But you are not a truck. You are a biological organism that requires fuel. And the best fuel on Earth is waiting for you if you are willing to look for it. Systems optimize for what they measure, not for what matters. We measured shelf life, transportability, and cost per pound. We forgot to measure nutrition. The vegetable that scores 100 out of 100 became a specialty item hidden in corner bins, while the vegetable that scores 7 became America's most consumed green. That is not a failure of watercress. It is a failure of the metrics we chose. Watercress did not disappear because it was inferior. It disappeared because the system we built was measuring the wrong things. Next time you're in the produce aisle, walk past the pyramids of shiny apples and the walls of plastic-wrapped iceberg. Go to the corner and find the watercress. It might not last for a month in your fridge, and it might wilt if you don't eat it quickly, but that is the point. It is alive, and it is waiting to help you feel alive too. If this story changed the way you look at the greens in your grocery cart, please subscribe and like this video. We are uncovering the history and the nutrition that the modern world has tried to bury. Let's reclaim our health together. The next treasure from nature's vault will be revealed soon.